Good afternoon, everybody. It's Lorraine, Alternative Homesteading on October 11, 2025. It is Saturday afternoon. Welcome back to my channel and thank you for subscribing. I'm going to read part 13. Yes, part 13 of my West Virginia horror story by our subscriber and targeted female, Deborah Florian, who has tediously documented her real estate mobbing, gang stalking, harassment by public officials, her home, mobbing around her home, things that have happened with her pets at her workplace mobbing. So now this is part 13, and here we go. And thank you, Deborah, for documenting this. This is very important for people to see the progression, what your life was like before. And Deborah is one of the few subscribers who's already provided a what my life was like before targeting video. So we've got one of those. I am eventually going to get to mine. But my entire channel is pretty much about that. But yeah, we're going to be doing mine as well. But I so appreciate Deborah's, because you can follow the progression from 1 now to 13, and there will be a 14, I'm sure. How her life has changed under targeting. So here we go. As targeted individuals, we are kept in perpetual motion, deflecting the blows inflicted by those recruited into the program against us. And when a perp or two is taken out of the picture, new ones are queuing up to take their place. There is no break in the action, although it might momentarily look that way. More trouble is always incoming. Literally, everyone new in our lives will be recruited against us. In this very long installment of my West Virginia horror story, I will be describing the relentless succession of tenant perps in the house at 396, 398 West Race Street in Martinsburg, West Virginia, where I lived in a rooming house for 7.5 years. Now, mind you, for those of you, and I have a lot of new subscribers who are maybe listening to this for the first time, I impel you to go back and read part 1 and 2 and 3 and through now of her West Virginia horror story to see that Deborah was a homeowner. She was very well off at one time. She was once married. She had a beautiful home that she loved. And she got mobbed out of her home and another home. And it was all about real estate developers, corrupt law enforcement, and perpetrators, gang stalkers all around her. So this is happening across the country. This is happening a lot to women, mostly women, but it is happening to men too. It's also happening to the elderly. When, one or more of the couple passes away, a lot of times they will pounce on the couple, the male or the female, who is left behind owning the home, and start whittling away at the value of that home. Because generally, if these people are 80 and 90 years old, they're not upkeeping the house anymore. Maybe their loved ones live far away, not visiting them as often. And they just think of it as a natural progression, which it is not. They move mobbers around to devalue the property, and then somebody in who wants that house, who wants that property, who wants that location for pennies on the dollar. And this is happening across the country. It's happening to me. It happens to me in New Jersey. It's happening to me now. And it happened repeatedly to Deborah Florian. So more trouble is always incoming. Literally everyone new in our lives will be recruited against us. And in this very long installment of my West Virginia horror story, I will be describing the relentless succession of tenant perps in the house at 396, 398 West Race Street in Martinsburg, West Virginia, where I lived in a rooming house for 7.5 years. As of January 1, 2022, I was the only tenant left in the huge old house, all 5,760 square feet of it. That is a huge house. Just to give you an example, if you go onto my main page and look at my house at Sutton Drive, I had a 27, almost 2,800 square foot house. And that's huge. So where Deborah's is a 5,760 square foot house. That is enormous. So Capital Development Enterprises in Martinsburg had acquired the house in late November 2021 and very quickly evicted the two other tenants for drunken behavior. And Deborah documented this in her last installment. This duo had close ties to the Berkeley County Sheriff's Department and had accordingly been successful at controlling the narrative regarding what went on at that rooming house. They were members of that special club. I'm sure they figured that connection would always save them. But this time, it didn't. And this is what happens. You know, the perps think they've got an ace in the hole. No, 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 no. No, the sheriff is not going to protect them. No. When it comes down to the sheriff or them, no, the sheriff is not going to protect the criminals at the expense of their job. So for this 6 days that I was the sole tenant, 6 days, it was really liberating to have free run of the house. However, the entry code for the numeric pad had not been changed, even though the recently evicted tenants were more than likely nursing a grudge and were still in the area. But I knew every sound in that house that old house made, and I could navigate through the corridors in total darkness. I'd been there a long time, and I knew Capital Development was looking for tenants, so I would not be alone for long. So on January 6, 2022, Willis moved in. He had lived there before for a few months back in 2019. His sudden reappearance felt reassuring at first. He didn't drink or do drugs and presented a conservative appearance, which was good for the house's damaged reputation. He had a vehicle and was in and out a lot, which was a positive for anyone that was watching the house with bad intent. Willis was also extremely intelligent and somewhat arrogant, but at first it seemed like the pluses would outweigh the minuses. But he quickly morphed into my most persistent and powerful perp. Yeah, you got to watch out for those really snarky, smart ones, you know. Those are the CIA agents. He might have been infraguard, too smart to be a lowly gift card whore. He was well connected. When it became obvious that the honeypot approach wasn't working, he changed gears and sought to get me embroiled in the legal system by accusing me of tampering with his mail. Like, why would you want his mail? I had taken to sitting and reading in the sunroom on the second floor of the rear of the house, directly above the back door. So I had a bird's eye view of activity in the rear parking area shared with the Busted Knuckles motorcycle repair shop. I'm sorry, I can't help but chuckle at the name of that repair shop, the Busted Knuckles motorcycle repair shop. On numerous occasions, I saw Will exchange brief, clandestine nods with the Busted Knuckles motorcycle repair perp as they passed one another. A very hush-hush vibe. No small talk, not even in a hello. I want to clarify that I'm not referring to the owner of Busted Knuckles, but he surely must have known what was going on. He is no one's fool. Whoops, wait, I just scrolled too far. 1 second. The first time I laid eyes on this biker perp was back in 2017. In the produce section of the Walmart on Foxcroft Avenue in Martinsburg, the gang stalker's mothership, Tom, another tenant at the rooming house at that time, had orchestrated our arrival to sync with that of the biker perps. Tom was nervous. He was too good a person to be caught up in the program. He was too nice. He couldn't say no. As Tom and I got closer to the perp, Tom said, quote, "He's here to be seen," unquote, while gesturing toward the perp. Tom left the rooming house shortly thereafter and didn't return my text. I'm sure he regretted getting involved. I became adept at the art of avoidance. As my bedroom window looked down onto the shared driveway between the rooming house and the busted knuckles building, I knew when the biker boys were outside. If I had to leave to catch a bus while they were out there, I would avoid the driveway and walk on the other side of the house down to the street. The biker boys wore honeypot traps, every one of them. And obviously, they had motorcycles. Back when I had a normal life, I loved riding motorcycles. And of course, the information gathering pretend friends had passed this on to those in charge of the program against me. But if anyone thinks I'd ever get on a bike again, they're deranged. I wouldn't trust another guy again, and certainly not in Martinsburg. Back to Willis. There was a telling moment at the community Thanksgiving dinner held at the church in Martinsburg in November 2021, a month and a half prior to Will's return to the rooming house. He attended this event with Mary, yet another former tenant, who relayed this story to me. Will and Mary were sitting at a long table with friends and family members, relaxing after their dinner. A man and his wife walked over to the table. Will and Mary knew this couple. They all frequented the same local senior center and had spent time together. Mary liked them. She thought the man was street smart. This man looked directly at Will and with no greeting accused Will of being a government operative. I'm telling you, that's exactly what I thought. He's a CIA. He's an operative. Absolutely. That is hilarious. According to Mary, you could hear a pin drop. Then one of the guys at the table let out a little laugh. The man making the accusation immediately shut him down, saying it wasn't a joke, that he meant it, and his wife thought so too. Then he left. Will excused himself from the table and was gone for over a half an hour. When he returned, he was very quiet. Mary said things were different with Will from that moment on. Yeah, he had to talk to his higher up, his boss. Will was a wanderer. He would rent a room for a while, then hop on a plane and live in Mexico. Then he would return to the United States and live with a friend in Falling Waters, West Virginia. Mary was quite surprised when she learned that Will had moved back into the rooming house, as he hadn't mentioned he was considering doing so. And it would have been something to talk about, as it was where they had met back in 2019 and reestablished a friendship that lasted until Will's death in June 2023. Oh my goodness. Maybe 2 weeks after Will's return to the rooming house, I casually mentioned that I was on a waiting list for an apartment at Woodbury Corners on the north side of Martinsburg. Just a harmless comment, right? Nope. I couldn't believe the look of shock and horror that spread across his face. I was dumbfounded. But these were the days before I knew how the program works. That Will's contract would abruptly terminate if I moved. That's right. That's exactly right. Well, it would terminate, or he'd have to go and move to where you're located. That might not be good. Like, I am not moving within Kentucky, so the local criminals, they're going to have to move across state lines. It's going to cost a lot of money, right? But I know, yeah, exactly. So a few days later, I found a scrap of paper on a table in the dining room with a phone number on it. I recognized the number. It was to the office at Woodbury Corners. Will was doing his best to instill fear. He was a highly effective perp. Yeah, likely. He was a higher paid perp. And yeah, he's a government, he was an operative for sure. There is clearly a difference between them and your criminal neighbors. Huge, huge difference. On January 15, 9 days after Will's return, a couple moved into the rooming house. She was a protected person, so I won't share their names. She didn't work, but he did. At Macy's, of course. And anybody that is listening for the first time, Deborah Florian worked at Macy's. So they lived at the house for only 6 weeks. Every sort of disruptive, frightening, and insane behavior was their quote-unquote normal. Steve Barnes, the owner of Capital Development, gives everyone a chance. It's who he is and what he does. But I recall the reluctance on part of Nikki, Nikki, Steve's savvy property manager, as she sat in the dining room with these two a day before they moved in. A few weeks later, she wound up calling the police to do a mental health check on the couple. But the police never showed, which felt strange, as Nikki and Capital Development are well known in the area. It seemed like this couple had been maneuvered into the rooming house by someone in a position to know rooms were available and whose suggestion would be followed. But this couple's conduct was so bad, they wound up getting evicted. With the introduction of the next two tenants, Owen and Nate, I became the only female in the rooming house. This is in large part why I am done. Why I am done with men. The games they play and the ridiculous assumptions made about my life during this time. But of course, this situation dovetailed with a smear campaign being waged against me. Little did anyone know or care about my feelings about the situation. It didn't help that Owen had guys over constantly. Black Jamaicans like himself. Owen would hang out in the small kitchen from morning onward. His friends dropped in almost every day. I felt uncomfortable trying to prepare food in the small crowded kitchen, so I stopped trying. Owen's friends were polite to me, but it was just too much. As the weather warmed, I started sitting outside. But a pattern soon emerged. A steady stream of vehicles would come in from West Race Street, up the driveway, then out the back gate behind the Busted Knuckles building. Some days it looked like the on-ramp to I-81, the busy interstate that runs through Martinsburg. There was no good reason for this parade, except that I was targeted for harassment for leaving my room and sitting outside. Gift card whores on parade. Owen was disabled, waiting for his disability claim to be approved. He used a walker and had a very hard time getting around. In order to get to the mailbox on the other side of the house, he had to navigate uneven paving stones and tiny decorative pebbles that shifted underfoot. The tenants in the rooming house shared one large black communal mailbox. So every day, I would take in whatever was in the box and deposit everyone else's mail on a table in the dining room, which seemed like a good idea until it wasn't. The first clue I had that Will was accusing me of tampering with his mail came as I overheard him telling someone on the phone. A conversation I was supposed to hear. So I began retrieving only my mail from the communal box. But of course, none of the man babies were walking out to take their mail in. Every day I stood at the box, sorting through an ever-increasing accumulation of envelopes to locate my new mail. While doing this, I saw official-looking stuff clearly related to Owen's disability claim, where time can be of the essence. So I would bring in those items inside and place them on the table, but I was thoroughly disheartened. As I already stated, Will moved a lot, which can cause confusion with the mail. And this was in 2022 when the Postal Service was still reeling from the pandemic. Nonetheless, Will was certain I was the problem. He reported me to Capital Development and the local post office for tampering with his mail. He was out to get me in serious legal trouble. Owen would get medication delivered to the house. I began to dread the knock on the back door. The Federal Express driver looking for Owen, who was never downstairs waiting for the delivery. The driver would want to leave the package with me, but I wanted nothing to do with accepting delivery of drugs for Owen. He would also get packages that were just left at the front door. At first, I would take them in, but it became clear that I was being surveilled as I did so. Even though I knew Owen would have a damn near impossible time bending down to pick the packages up, I stopped taking them in. Owen was from Jamaica. I never knew the details of his citizenship immigration status, but I think the local cops did. Owen was a person of faith. Every Sunday he attended church. His Jamaican friends provided transportation, and one Sunday afternoon I was sitting in the living room, facing the windows looking out into the driveway. A streak of shiny black Tahoe Explorer, Yukon, or Expedition sped up the driveway toward the kitchen where the entrance is. The back door opened. It sounded like a number of men were coming inside. They were laughing, and not in a nice way. They were not Jamaican. They were white. They were bringing Owen home from church. I heard his voice. He sounded very uncomfortable. They were cops. Owen had been recruited. To be continued. Oh, poor Owen. And this is what they do. They pray. They prayed on him. He's in a wheelchair. That is horrible. That is so horrible that they recruited him. They probably bribed and blackmailed him. That is very sad. Very, very sad. I'm sorry to hear that, Deborah. But this is absolutely a riveting testimony, part 13. I'm looking forward to part 14 because now this is like a cliffhanger. You've left us hanging in the air. So now we're craving part 14. And I'm sure it'll be every good as part 13. Well, evidently that guy was an operative. Like, come on. You know the difference between the local loser perps and the operatives. And like even when I lived in New Jersey, the Steve Sarantino, who lived next door, who lived there only for a year and then moved across the street, he was part of the real estate mobbing. He was the one who would hide in the shrubs and stuff, and pounce onto my porch and open up my door and throw my cosmetics in that he'd already stolen from upstairs. But he was an operative. But he was like a lower level operative. He wasn't just a typical perp, but he wasn't the higher level perp, like the one that moved in after him, or the one that was diagonally across the street, who I really liked, actually. So anyway, yeah, so every once in a while, these, you can tell who they are. You can tell the higher level operatives from the local perps. It's so obvious. They're not going to pay the big bucks to somebody who can't think for themselves, right? So anyway, yeah, and they're probably CIA agents. It could be Infraguard, but I don't know, maybe not. But I'm so looking forward to part 14. And I feel so bad for Owen, this Jamaican guy in a wheelchair and a person of faith. How could they do that to him? That's so mean and cruel. But anyway, thank you, Deborah, for providing this testimony. My West Virginia Horror Story, Part 13, Deborah Florian. And I highly recommend you're going back to Part 1 through Part 13 if you have time. I mean, most of the videos, they could be anywhere from like 10 minutes to 20 minutes. 20 minutes, 22 minutes. So this one is 24 minutes time. And you will see the progression of what targeting has done to this woman's life. And what you too can look forward to if you are a newly targeted person. So this is a warning to people. This is a heads up that this truly is happening. It's happened to me when I lived at 52 Sutton Drive, Manalapan, New Jersey, a home I lived in for 30 years as the original owner. And to answer your question, somebody asked me, because I posted on my community page a post of a painter that I hired. His name is Joe, or Jonathan. I'm not even sure which one is his legal name. Plumber, Plummer. He is not a plumber. He's a painter. But he ended up stealing $4,100 from me and a bunch of other items from my garage and from my daughter and myself. And when I went to report it to the Manalapan Police Department, they refused to take my report on him. But I had documented proof that he stole the money, and still they wouldn't take my report. So yeah, so somebody asked me, well, did you know that he was a perp? And it's like, no, I did not know, because I had hired him the year before and all was copacetic. Everything was fine. So, when you hire somebody, they do good work, and then you need more work, you hire them again. So I hired him again. But one of the things that he was doing that he'd never done before is like, if I would have run out and do errands, he would sometimes ask me, are you going to be near the bagel store? Quote unquote, the bagel store, which is where his cousin, allegedly his copper cousin, is the one who was stalking me. If I'm going to be by the bagel store, could you pick me up a bagel, blah, blah, blah. And he said, and buy yourself one. So he would pay for my bagel, get himself a bagel, so I'd go to the bagel store. That would keep me out of the house. Little did I know that he was manipulating, he was moving things out of my house, stealing things from me. And he was on the phone a lot too. But I was under so much stress preparing to move. I was doing all this work on the house to place my house on the market again, to move. So as a single person in a 5-bedroom house with cats and a daughter and everything, you're not thinking of all these things. So I knew that I was being targeted for some reason. I did not know, to answer your question, I did not know the extent of who was involved. I didn't know. I didn't know it was like a quote-unquote program. I just thought it was the local feral cat cartel that had employed some private contractors to harass me. I did not know it was a government program. I didn't know. So to answer your question, that. And you can see from Deborah's West Virginia Horror Story, Part 13, how these creatures infiltrate your life. And I am so sorry, Deborah, that you have had it with men. Like, I still actually like men. But I'll tell you right now, Deborah, that the men here in Jackson County, Kentucky, that goes for everyone that holds any kind of a public office around here. They are evil to the core. And yes, I will be doing a video on the Jackson County PVC office. The office who does the property evaluations here in Jackson County, Kentucky. But then they single out only one person to increase the property taxes and overlooking all of the upgrades that other people in the area have done. Yes. And then they claim that they've sent you a notice of an increased valuation, but they never did. And then they never gave you the opportunity to refute it. They lied. But we'll be doing a separate video on that, because I will be filing a big complaint against the perpetrator at the Jackson County PVA office, who's only there about 2 years, and I guarantee he's just another one of those little weenie boys. Yes. So, Deborah, I feel your pain. I still like men. I just don't like any of the men here in Jackson County, Kentucky. And evidently in West Virginia, I probably wouldn't like any of those either. So I'm so sorry. You need to move out of West Virginia and move somewhere else where there are nicer men. So I'm going to sign off for now. Leave a comment down below. And remember tonight, it is Saturday. I will have my live stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. It's from 10 until midnight Eastern Time. And if I find out that you're a perpetrator, if you start leaving derogatory comments, I will block you. I will put you in timeout. And you won't be able to participate anymore. Okay? So I did have to do that last week, and I had to do it the week before. And sometimes, the perpetrators come in and they they will post like one or two like decent comments, and then they start ramping it up. Okay, so anybody who's in the chat, like if I'm reading and I don't see what's happening, feel free to chime in and alert me that there's a perp in the chat, and you can put them in timeout. If you want me to make you a temporary moderator, I can do that also. So anyway, I hope to see you tonight. It is 10 p.m. Eastern time, and thank you so much, Deborah. I'm looking so forward to part 14. Now you've left like a cliffhanger here, and I want to find out what happened to this poor guy, Owen. Signing off for now.